So, Governor, first of all, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. This seems on the GOP side to be the year of the disruptor. You're the guy with experience. Based on what's happened so far, why should you be the last man standing?
Well, look, I think at the end, people will settle down and decide we don't want somebody that's status quo, but we want somebody who will challenge the establishment and get us some wage increases and secure my job and help my kid get a job. But somebody that knows how to do it. And I want to tell you, I have had, you have revelations when you're out in the field. And look, the reason why I've struggled is because people don't know me. And for the first time, they're starting to know me. And I know it because when I walk around, there are people like, can I take a picture? And, but they didn't know me until after New Hampshire. So there's been a short period of time for people to find out who I am, but yet I think many still have not formed a full opinion because I'm a new kid on the block.
Well, you got the Globe endorsement, which was pretty glowing, the New York Times endorsement. But at the same time, one of the reasons they endorsed you was because you don't adhere to conservative orthodoxy on things like Common Core, path to legalization on immigration, taking Medicare expansion funds under Obamacare. So why should conservative voters believe you're a conservative candidate?
Well, because I've balanced more budgets than anybody that anybody on that stage. I've cut more taxes than anybody. It's all resulted in job growth, and in my own state, as governor, I've cut taxes more than anybody. I've got balanced budgets, running surpluses. We've grown 400,000 private sector jobs. I'm for school choice. But look, I'm also a guy that says we have to solve problems. I'm not going to put my head in the sand and say, well, I can't do that because somebody in my party may not like it. It's just not who I am. But maybe I also think I'm not a conservative because I don't yell a lot and I'm not an angry man. I'm actually a happy guy.
Well, speaking of that, one of the things I heard from Springfield, and I actually saw you this morning on CNN, I don't know, may I use the word complaining? You're frustrated, let's put it that way, with the fact that the media has not given you as much attention because I think you said, because you're not yelling and screaming.
Yeah.
Are we part of the problem with the Kasich effort?
I don't think there's any question, and I'm not really frustrated. I'm just pointing out the fact that if you take a look at the amount of airtime that the TV people have given Donald Trump as compared to the airtime they've given me, it's all about eyeballs. Now, we're not running for class president. We're trying to pick the leader of the free world. So the question is, who's the most qualified to do this? I had incredible success in Washington, balancing the budget, reforming welfare, jobs grew out of all of it, reforming the Pentagon, all that experience, and the same thing in Ohio. But you know what? People today are not, I guess, it's not just the media people want to watch, It's like the third turn at Talladega. Sometimes people want to see a crash. I understand that. And look, here's what I believe is over time this will settle down, but I'm going to have to win Ohio. I mean, if I don't win Ohio, I'm done. But I'm going to win Ohio, and it's going to be a whole new race, and people they'll get it.
Part of the calling card for you, by the way, I want to make clear, you brought up Donald Trump before I did.
Yeah,
Let's make that just for the record here. We'll get back to him in a minute. One of your calling cards is you are able to work with people across the aisle. Trent Lott and Tom Daschle were on with me a couple of weeks ago, wrote this book called Crisis Point about how they think we can deal with this grotesque dysfunction in Washington in concrete ways, not rhetorically. What do you do as president to get Washington working again, Governor?
I've done it all in my career. I'm able to get along with people in the other party. In fact, there was a Blue Dog Democrat down in Mississippi. That's a conservative Democrat that helped me when I was budget chairman. And I actually took him into a Republican fundraiser that was being held for me. And he didn't want to go in there. He said, well, if I go in there, you might lose votes. I said, well, you're my buddy. And I don't turn my back on my friends. And we walked in the door, and the Republicans in the room cheered for him. You see, we have to be Americans before we're Republicans or Democrats. And let me say another thing about the yelling and the screaming and the insults. None of the great leaders that I've ever admired ever resorted to that. Not President Reagan, not Margaret Thatcher, not Winston Churchill. I mean, they're firm, they're strong, they're definitive, but they don't yell. Great leaders don't yell. Great leaders are people that can command a room. And I would choose to be able to get this job so I could really solve the problems in this country.
Speaking of working together, I believe you have said that you would urge the president not to nominate a replacement for Antonin Scalia, but if that he did, you'd like it to be somebody who could get unanimous approval.
That's not going to happen.
There's a guy, Sri Srinivasan, who serves in the appellate court in D.C., who was approved unanimously for that position. Why would he, who apparently is high on the president's list, why shouldn't someone like that, who's already gotten unanimous approval, get unanimous approval again?
Because I know the Republican Senate's not going to do it.
Would you vote for him if you were in the Senate?
Well, I don't know. I'm not in the Senate, thank goodness, and I'm glad I'm governor.
But do you support the notion that
well,
they say...
I don't know who he is.
No, not him. Do you support their notion, the latest, no hearing, not even courtesy visits with whoever the president puts forward?
It seems out of order, okay, but I have to tell you, I've never seen a president who's been so unable to work with the Congress. Somebody who's passed Obamacare with no Republican votes, used executive authority and basically thumbed his nose at the Congress. You can't just blame the Congress for this. I mean, this is a breakdown in that town. Now, the reason I said what I said, of course the president has a right to send a name, but we're just prolonging the fighting. So why don't we get a twofer? We can elect the president and determine the direction of the court. And let me tell you, people say, well, would you send somebody? If I had so polarized the country, I probably wouldn't. But I don't think that's the way I would be, and I'm not a polarizing figure.
You know, speaking of President Obama, I know when you were a kid, when you were 18 years old at Ohio State, you wrote a letter to Richard Nixon, and amazingly, the next day he responded, and lo and behold, you're in the Oval Office. I assume he would not be a role model, though. I think I'm guessing that's a safe assumption. For people who wonder what kind of president you'd be, who would you govern most like in terms of somebody who's actually already served in that position?
I think it would be a lot like Reagan. I actually was there when he was president. Very tough guy, but soft in tone, good heart, knew what he wanted to do and went and did them. Didn't get too many things going all at once. That kind of a tone, I mean, every once in a while you'd get a Harry Truman out of me too, because, I'm capable of making sure I assert myself. So, look, I think being a president means that you are a leader in terms of the tone and temperament of our country, but you also have to have policies. Look, the most important thing we can do as president is get the jobs going. The most important thing that any public official can do is create an environment for job growth. Because when jobs are there, families are strong, kids do well, communities do well, and when you don't have the jobs, everything kind of falls apart. But I would say one other thing about it. And that is, with the job growth and with prosperity, we shouldn't leave anybody behind. The mentally ill, the drug addicted, the working poor. I mean, these are people that deserve an opportunity to rise also.
Let's talk about three Massachusetts governors. Bill Weld was with me the other night, big supporter of yours. Have you approached Charlie Baker about endorsing your candidacy?
I've talked to him, and he said he was going to spend some time thinking about it. And of course, I've talked to him. I don't know when he'll decide, but we have mutual friends.
But you've asked for his endorsement.
Yeah, I said, yeah, Charlie. I said, what are you thinking? Because I'd really like to have him.
And what did he tell you?
Said he's thinking about it all, and he's going to meet with staff and aides and try to figure it out. I mean, these endorsements, look, Bill Weld's endorsement is great because he's an iconic figure. The newspaper endorsements are important, but at the end, it's what happens in the community, what happens in the town halls, what happens in the neighborhoods.
The third governor, Mitt Romney, New York Times reports today, he contacted you directly, or at least one of your people, and asked you to pull out so
No,
people
never
could.
did.
No,
Never
none
did.
of your staff,
It's a
nobody.
It's a false report.
Let's talk about Trump, since you brought him up for a couple of minutes. Chris Christie, friend of yours, endorses Trump.
Yeah.
Today, Jeff Sessions, apparently an ally of Cruz's, endorsed Trump. Does this not feed this morning? He did in Alabama.
Especially, I think after Cruz keeps talking about Jeff Sessions standing with him, that's kind of surprising.
But does this not feed the notion, whether you like it or not, and obviously you don't, that this guy is inevitable in the GOP
No,
side?
I don't think he's inevitable. When I beat him in Ohio, it's a whole new ballgame. See, look, and if I go head-to-head with him in Ohio, I beat him by 18 points. So, there's no inevitability. If there's anything if there's any business where things are not inevitable, it's politics. And you know that.
I saw you on CNN this morning saying you'd support the nominee, whoever it was of your party. But on that same show, and you didn't know this at the time, Donald Trump was asked by the host, Jake Tapper, if he would disavow the support of David Duke and the Klan. And he said he didn't know enough about them. Tapper asked him a number of times. he said, I don't know enough, I can't disavow anything. Later, he tweeted, said, I already disavowed them. What's your reaction to what Trump didn't say this morning?
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, if this was a guy who didn't disavow them, that would be a deal breaker in terms of my support. I'm glad to hear that he put something out and disavowed them. I've been in the seat when people get asked questions and hypotheticals, but he should have flat out said, white supremacist groups have no place in my life, in my party, or in the country. That's what he should have said.
But you appear to be willing to forgive that, let's call it a lapse, for lack of a better expression, on that show, because he tweeted out later. I mean, obviously he tweeted out later.
Look, here's what I'm trying to say, and there is no guarantee about me at the end, but my sense is the best I can tell you, when you are in the arena and you're out there and you're doing your job, I think people who are in the arena deserve to be supported. Now, if he does, if this becomes something where I think he's winking at a white supremacist group, he's not going to get my support then. But I don't know the full story behind it all, but I think it's an outrage.
Well, I mean, the only thing I think that matters, with all due respect, Governor, is he says, I don't know enough about the Klan and David Duke. Is there an American who doesn't know who David Duke is and what he stands for, what the Klan stands for?
I'm not going to be making any excuses for Donald Trump. At the end of the day, he should have disavowed him. And if I get the sense that he's not disavowing, I wouldn't support him. Okay? But that was, I did the CNN interview a day ago, and none of that had happened.
Oh, I understood. No, I wasn't. I was suggesting you knew.
Yeah.
He has said, this is the last Trump question you'll be happy to hear. I do want somebody for vice president. It's political because I want to get lots of great legislation we all want passed. You don't win the nomination. Donald Trump does. Ohio matters a lot. You know how Washington works. Do you say yes to Donald Trump?
I say absolutely no. I will not run for vice president.
Is that Sherman-esque? Under no circumstance
would you? I got the second best job in the country. I'm governor of Ohio. I mean, I know Governor of Massachusetts is a good job, but I love my job, but I think it is going to work out, because when we win Ohio, it's going to stop Trump in his tracks.
When you watch,
that's pretty good alliteration.
It was actually, and I'm sorry I just talked over it. My apologies. When you watch a Republican debate, do you remember the great routine on Saturday Night Live where Dana Carvey is playing George H.W. Bush and John Lovitz is playing Dukakis, and George H.W. Bush, Dana Carvey says something ridiculous, and they turn to John Lovitz as Dukakis, and Dukakis says, and I'm losing to this guy? Is there not a point when you're on stage and you have Cruz, Rubio, and Trump yelling at each other where you say to yourself, I can't believe I am losing to any of these people?
Well, it's not over.
No, I understand that, but I'm talking about where it is.
But I'm not losing. Losing means that I failed, and then if I were to fail, I'd have to explain at least I'd have to think to myself why. Look, the biggest problem I have is people don't know me. But when they know me, we do really well. And so, look, I don't like the yelling and screaming or any of that, and it's unacceptable to me. But I'm not going to engage in that, because I think the people who I've admired throughout my lifetime don't conduct themselves that way.
Does the president deserve any credit for anything? Unemployment lowest since February of '08, gas prices $1.75. How would you grade him?
Well, I wouldn't grade him high, because when I look at the foreign policy, as I pointed out in the debate, there's lots of things happening that are really putting us behind the 8 ball. Look, I mean, with the economy, I've had the wind in my face the whole time I've been governor and none at my back. Look, the guy, I will say this about him. I mean, he's been a great father, a great family guy, and I like that. I will give him some credit for flexing a little bit of military muscle in the South China Sea. But I think that, look, this is not so much. The problem that Barack Obama has is he was inexperienced and he didn't know how to deal with Congress. And this party has run around talking about how could we elect a first-term senator who didn't have experience. And now when I look on the stage, we have two first-term senators. It makes me kind of chuckle.
Before you go, Governor, there was a moment that I think even people who don't support you would say was incredibly moving the other day. You were in South Carolina, I think at a town hall, and a young kid from the University of Georgia had this really emotional moment.
Like over a year ago, a man who was like my second dad, he killed himself. And then a few months later, my parents got a divorce. And then a few months later, my dad lost his job. And I was in a really dark place for a long time. I was pretty depressed, but I found hope, and I found it in the Lord and in my friends, and now I've found it in my presidential candidate that I support. And I'd really appreciate one of those hugs you've been talking about.
Can you describe what that moment was like in your head and what that...
Well, it was not unusual. This has been happening to me for 6 months. People have been willing to come and tell me some of their toughest things happening in their life. It has been a remarkable experience. It's changed my life because what I've done is slow down my life, and I hope it'll stick. Slow down my life to find out what's in somebody else's head. What got captured that day with that very nice young man telling that fairly terrible story about losing people and his grief and how he found the Lord was really emblematic of what I've been hearing now for literally 6 months. People there are many people out there that don't have anybody to celebrate their victories or maybe to sit with them and cry. And our country will be great, not because we just elect the president, but because our neighborhoods get put back together again and people believe that they have the ability to change the world only if it's one other person. It's so great for me to be able to say that because I believe it so profoundly. And for some reason, I'm in a position where maybe lots of people have heard me say it. And that's a really good thing to have been able to do as a public official, and I think a good leader, I hope.
Governor, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.